Hey everybody, this is Carl again from Tabletop Tango. I've been again working on some Roll20 stuff to play with it, and I thought again I'd share some of the work I was doing and how you can take advantage of it. Today I'm looking at making some user interface, things that you can allow interactivity with your scripts through button clicking, and how we might do that. And I came up with the cool little script that I'm going to use to demonstrate that. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to bring up my page as I always do. And so we have our Roll20 area that for playing, and I've already opened up my script API scripts. Remember, you do that from the launch screen where you click down on the down arrow and say API scripts. So I'm in that. If you want to get more introductory type information on using the Roll20 API, I suggest you watch a previous video I did. I'm not going to go through a lot of that. Just going to focus on some of the cool things. So why did I create another script? Well, I was tired of this. So here, I want to draw, quickly I need to draw a dungeon room. Okay, so I can almost get it perfect, but it's not really square, it's a different shape. So I need to do that. Okay, well that's kind of a pain, but I now I need to draw a door real quick. So I'll pick a different color, and I'll draw my door, and draw my door, and there I go. I've got a door. Oh, I drew that. Oh God, what a pain in the butt! Just so I can get my players something to play on. So I said, well, I'm going to make it easier on myself. So I'm going to create a thing called a turtle. Application. And for those who do not know, back in the 80s there was a thing called Turtle Graphics, which allowed you to program a little turtle in space that would walk different distances and leave a line behind it, and you could put the pen up, put the pen down, and it would just walk around, and that's how it would draw things, and it was great for kids. And so I called my script Turtle. So what is my turtle script going to do for me? It's going to, let's say we start at 5.5. It's going to allow me to, you see a little cursor, it brings up a user interface, and I can quickly, let's make my dungeon room real fast. Remember, we wanted it to have a hole in the wall here, go like that. Well, what if I need a door? Well, I'm going to create door color here, and I'll walk and make my door, and then I'll go back to wall color, and I'll do that. And oh, I need a hole in the wall, so I'm going to put my pen up, walk, put the pen back down, and then do that. But I also made it so a little cooler, so now I can still, if I want to, well, let's make sure I'm on the maps, because this draws on a map. I can move my cursor real quick, and it'll automatically jump to a good vertices, and so now I can draw a little, maybe it's got a column in the middle of the room, and so I can more easily just kind of draw things around. And so there I go, my room. It took me like almost no time to do. And so now we're going to learn about how to make this script, what we did in our script. And so we'll eliminate that, all that stuff, and we'll go ahead and we'll jump to the script. Now this script uses the exact same pattern that I use in all my scripts. And I recommend you go back to the first video where I walk through what this looks like, but suffice it to say we have sort of this structure where we create a function. We have a variable defined, commas after it, and then we have our functions for defined, and then we come down here at the bottom after all my functions, and we have a function called register event handlers where we register our two event handlers, and then this big function returns the check install call and the check registers call, and then here on ready. So again, ready means that when the campaign is up and running, we go ahead and we call our check install, and we call our register events. Here's our register events, and way at the top is the check install. So that's the pattern I use every time. So to start with, we know that we're going to need to do a couple of functions, and we talked about that. So there's a chat message handler, which takes when when something's typed into the chat window, it gets this callback gets called handle input, and this is where we're going to be able to handle our turtle commands that we're going to create. And everything here is a turtle command: pen down, pen up, move left, right. All those are commands. And then when I'm dragging my cursor around, my little cursor, and dropping it in different spots, that's changing that drawing. And every drawing in Roll20 is called a path. And so now I also have change paths. So when the path gets changed, I'm going to handle that cursor move. So let's look at our handle input real quick here. And so we talked about this many times before, but again, when we call this, we get the message. We have to check that it's an API message. We split all of our parameters. We first check to see that it's our command, which I'm calling turtle. And then we, based on that, we grab the next argument and we check what it is. Is it help? Is it start? And so for me, my turtle, I'm starting it when I use the start command. And so then you saw that I entered a left number and a top number, which is where I wanted to position it on the screen. And so top is undefined or left is undefined. Then we're just going to say missing parameter. We can make that far more sophisticated if we so desire. And then we call our start turtle function, which essentially its job is to take that left and top. It sets these state variables, and we talked about state variables before. So if we look at the start top here, we have the state is a global variable Roll20 provides, and then we put our name on it so that we kind of create a namespace. So all of ours are now going to be an object of all the different state variables we want. I create two helper functions called getProperty and setProperty, which take a key value, and then it sets the key in our property, our state, or it reads a key from the state. So I use those helper functions. So now we'll get back to start turtle. So start turtle, we set our current left to the left, our current top to the top, set those properties, which again are the state variables, and then we go ahead and create our cursor. How do we create a cursor? Well, this is now a drawing. So here's some fun with a path, if you've never used paths before. To create a path, it's just like creating any other object where we take and we say we're creating a path, and then we're giving it an object that has all the key pieces of information that it requires to do what it's going to do. We tell it to put it on the map layer because this is a map, so I'm going to put it on the map. And then we give it a JSON string that defines the sort of how it's going to be, how the lines get put together. And for a rectangle, which our cursor is, we really start at here, we go over our width, then we go down to the bottom corner, our width and height, and then we come back to the beginning, and so then we get a square. So we've got a bunch of constants defined. So let's walk through this function. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Sorry about that. So this function, first thing we want to do is get the current page, because I'm going to assume that we brought the characters to a page. We need to suddenly draw a dungeon they can drop on. Obviously, if we know an ID for a different page, we could go to that page. But I'm just going to use the page that the players are currently sitting on. My width and my height, I'm just going to use some predefined constants that I have. Then we're going to go ahead and create that path. And so again, as always, I forget to bring up the dev site before I start. But we'll go ahead and do that now. Go to the help wiki. We're going to go to our API, and then we're going to go check our objects out, and so that we can go look at the path. And so path has all these properties. There's a little nuancy thing with width and height I'll talk about. And if you want to understand more about how the paths are put together, there's a whole page that talks about the paths and how they're put together. So if you're doing a simple polygon, you have this sort of structure. If you do an oval, they're a little more complicated. You define sort of these bounding boxes to define it, and that's why you can draw a circle or an ellipse or what have you. And then there's even more complex functions where you can do freehand paths, and like you would draw. In our case, we just need a simple cursor. And we're going to need simple lines, so we don't need to get that sophisticated. So if we go back to our function again, we're not very sophisticated. We're just drawing a box, and that's pretty straightforward. So we go ahead and create this object. We're going to tell it the page. We're going to say our width and our height. And our width and height define how big the bounding box is that have the grabber handles. So if we go back to here into our Roll20, I lost my thing here. Let's draw something. So if you click on this, you see you've got these grab handles. That defines the width and height of those handles, and we want that to be the same size as our cursor. And so we define them as that. I'm trying to find my thing again. Okay. But there's a nuance to that. As soon as you define these, it's defined like from the center point, and they go out. So when we talk about our left and our top, we're giving a position of the cursor, and I'm going to say the left is, and this pix per unit is 70 right now because that's the size of a normal square in Roll20. But in my script, I define these all as constants, so we can change them if we so desire. So let's go back to our create cursor. So I put the left and right, and so that is the point of a vertice. And when this thing draws, because of the cursor width and height, it's actually going to expand from that point. So if you look back at you notice it's centered. Even though that's the top left with corner, it's centered with respect to this spot. Does that make sense? I hope so, because I can't hear you asking a question. So we create our little object. We put it in the front, and then we return it because we're going to, in our start, we're going to set that property to our cursor. So now we know what object on the screen is our cursor, which path. Now we get to the interesting part. So we're going to talk about user interfaces. So when you get this user interface in Roll20, like we have here, every one of these buttons, these links, you can link to a script. So when I click the move up, I'm calling turtle with a set of parameters. And so let's take a look at what we're doing here. So we're trying to make it look pretty, and so we put some style sheets. But let's look at one of the functions. So here's one of our commands. And so forget all the style information, but here's the command itself. Turtle, move turtle left. So for our move left, we have turtle, move turtle left. And so that, again, triggers in the message window, something sent to the message window. And so we go up to here, and if we look at our turtle, we got help, start. We have our move turtle, and then that gets an argument, and that argument is left, right, up, down. So that's it. That was all it took for me to put a user interface piece into my script. And so now I can interact with the script without typing commands. I can just click on these links. And so I have that set up for move left, right, up, and down. When I want to put the turtle pen up, I have a command turtle up. And here's that command turtle up, turtle down, set the door color, set the wall color. Those are all commands that I can put within my UI. So we go back to here, and we see that we set all these up. We put them in a table to make them look pretty. So here's our pen up and the command, that href. And so it's a standard link. And so that's href is our link. So instead of an http :www something, we're putting a command, which is turtle up. And we do that for all of our functions. And so as we get now our different commands come through, we can react to it. So for our down and up of our pen, we set the property down. If for our door, we set the property door, or wall, door true, or wall, it's going to be door false. And then when we get our move turtle, we go ahead and we move the turtle with a number of grid squares distance. So when we say left, we're going -1 to the left, 0 up and down, right? So I could update this script to go kitty corner if I wanted to, but I don't have that. I have it pretty basic. So when we talked about moving the turtle, let's see what happens then. we get our delta left, our delta right as our function. We parse these values because these values could be strings. We parse them as integers and put them in the value. We get the property current left, current top. Again, it could be represented as a string, so we're going to parse that and make sure that these are recognized as integers because we're going to do math with them. We get a local variable based on that property. I don't like having properties kind of interspersed in commands, so I sort of pull them all in up front and ahead, and then we use them later. Multiplier left, multiplier top. This I use because you look down when we create our path, it's all from 0, 0 to some area. So if we're going left, it's not going to go negative. Maybe it will, but I've never had any success when I was debugging this, have it actually go negative. So maybe I was doing something wrong, but in my case, so I just set it so if it's greater than 0, I'm going to have that distance. If it's less than 0, well, I'm just going to use 0 so that we move it. And then, so it'll always draw from one side to the other. So if we go back to our guy here, you probably can't see it. It's probably too quick, but it's always drawing from left to right because of that. So we move, it's always drawing from this direction to that direction. So let's go back to, and kind of notice that since we can manipulate our object and it still figures it out and can handle that. So let's go back. So we're going to create a path. If it's down, we're going to create a path. If it's not, that means we don't have the pen down. There's no reason. We're just going to move the cursor. And so there's a lot of math here, not important. And yes, it's inefficient because technically I could pull this pixel per unit out because everyone is multiplied by it. And we know our basic mathematics allows us to pull that out. And so we'd be current plus multiple plus 0.5 times. From illustration purpose, it's easier to show you all the things that are going on. So we take our current left, which we're keeping track in number of grids. And so now we need into pixels. And then we're going to take that multiplier that we came up here, and we're going to do a pixel per unit. And then this 0.5 pixels per unit is, again, we want it on the edge of the square. If we go back here, again, we want it up here or on the side. We don't want it in the middle. And you notice, remember what we talked about here, is if we put that value certain place, it's actually thinking when we have the width and height that's in the middle. We don't want that. So we're going to offset by half of a grid length so that when we go width and height, now technically I shouldn't do this because this is saying the height and the width is now a square. But it seems in the case of what I'm doing, it kind of works out. So if you click on one of these and it's drawn, it's actually, you can see that the grab handles are for the whole grid instead of what you would normally have if you were drawing a polyline, which would then be normally just you would just have the handles the size. So I'm not doing that. You can do it however you want when you write your scripts. I just thought this was easier. I don't have to kind of, if I'm changing sizes or I'm doing anything to it, it seemed a lot easier to have these separated by a little bit. My choice. You can choose to do different. So we go back to the code. So we made our width, and so again, it was going to try to center it, but we offset so that when it centers it, we offset, and then again, we're going to draw a line. Our absolute, because again, we always draw from the one direction. So if it's negative, we're still drawing from the direction. Absolute on the other side for the top. So we're going to draw a 0, 0, a line, and that's it. Notice that's a little bit different than we drew our cursor, where we also had multiple lines because we were drawing a square. Here we're not. We're drawing just a line. And then we put it to the back behind anything. So, if you got furniture or something in your new room that you're creating, it'll go to the back. And then we set the property, our new left and our new right. And again, I got a lot of inefficient mathematics in here, but you know what? I don't really care. It's just to show how this works. And so you understand. So now we need to move the cursor because we just drew a line and we need the cursor at the end of the line. So we get it from our property. We grab that object. So remember our get object command takes a kind of object. And if we go to we go here and we go back to our objects, every object has a type. Has a type. And so when we get a get object, which is we go back to our function documentation, we have all these object commands: create object, filled object, and we're going to get object. And so we're getting our object. In our case, it's going to be the string type, which is a path, and the object ID. Now, why you need both, I don't know. I would think that the object IDs would be unique, but I don't know. So we get that path, we get our cursor ID, so now we have it. Now we're looking to see if it's undefined. So, because what happens if somebody comes in here, again, we want to make our script robust, right? So we need to think about errors. So I'm doing this, and what if I say, well, okay, all this is garbage. I don't want that anymore. I'm going to draw, oh, I deleted my cursor. So that cursor no longer exists. That object's been deleted. So if I come and I say, well, that ID, I go to get the object, it's not exist, it's undefined, we're going to be smart and just remember that location and create a new cursor instead of crashing, which is what it would do, because you'd get an undefined when you're using that. So we go ahead, and if it's undefined, meaning someone deleted it, we're going to create a whole new cursor. We'll just go ahead and put it at 1, 1, and then we'll move it right away, and so no one will notice. And then we set the property for this new ID. We do our mod. Remember, when we mod an object, we set all the parameters that we want to change. So for an object, so our object, we're changing a left and top parameter, and then we call the set. So we take an object, and when we want to get the properties, we use get. So here we're getting its ID. When we want to set, we set, and what we pass in, again, as we remember from previous videos, is an object that has those parameters defined. Okay? So we have our basics of our script. Now, when the cursor moves, somebody grabs it, we have, again, path change. So the path changes, and if you've been doing scripts, you probably do this with tokens a lot, right? So when the tokens change, you manage them. But again, we're doing that for paths. So now when our path changes, we handle the cursor move. First thing we make sure is that it's the right one. Otherwise, we're just going to fail out because every object that you move will be calling this function. And so then we get the left and top. So we find out where it's located. We find out the new square, which is left. So we get the new left squares, which is left, right. Our new left then is left squares, top, and then we set that. Okay? And so that moves the cursor to the current left. Well, it's actually kind of the opposite. What's going on is we're setting our current left to where our cursor is. So, sorry, I kind of got myself confused there because I was thinking about it following, but when we're dragging it, we're actually, sorry again, kind of confused, but when we're dragging it around, we're changing where our location of this line, where this line should be drawn from, we're changing that. So whenever this object is moved, and you'll notice it jumps to the vertices. And how do we do that? In this little UI example, that's where this round function, so we take where it's located, we divide it by the pixel per units. That gives us a, like 1.5, 7.6. We round it, and this rounds, does a proper rounding function. So anything above 0.5, like 1.51 becomes 2, 1.4 becomes 1. And so that moves it to the closest vertice. Then we redefine it by multiplying that close vertice now by a pixel unit. So now we have a whole number of 70. So if I put this at 1.4, it turned into 1, and multiply it, now we got a 70. We set the current to 70, and so that's the new drawing spot. And now we're going to mod our cursor. So we say where its new left and new top is and mod it. And so that's what grabs it and moves it right to that vertice. So we handled our move. So, and you can do this in your scripts now. If you need to move have something that you can move around and interact with, and handle it. So like if I'm moving a light source or something and I want to be able to handle that change, I can handle that change because this would call that function. Now this, I don't have any of these snapping to the grid because I don't care. They're not my cursor. So again, we can move our cursor anywhere we want. We can quickly draw our little room without, that's perfectly aligned to the vertices. We can, you know, pen up, make a couple of jump, pen down, move a little bit more. And so we can make very interesting rooms without having to try to figure out how to get our multifaceted line to work the way we want it to. We just click away and away we go. And if anything you didn't like it, we can just, again, just delete it, start over again. We'll go, it was supposed to be smaller. Done. All right, so what did we learn? What did we learn? This was a fun one. I had fun doing this one. So what did we learn? So we learned about our UI. So when you're defining the UI and you're sending it to the chat, we just use the function name or the script name. So here we want to move up, turtle, move, turtle, up. And that is in our handle input. And why is it in handle input? Because we set our, sorry, I'm scrolling. There's a lot of stuff here. We set our chat message on chat message to handle input. And so every time we click on that link, it sends that chat message to the window. It parses it. It says we've got a command. It executes that command. Now, when we move our cursor around the board, that one is a different handler. That's the handle. Go down again. That's handling a change to the path, right? Because our left and top changed. We do some math to get it to the vertices. We rewrite it. We save our information into our state variable so that we know exactly where we're at. And so when we give a command to move, the next command, it'll go ahead and use those data values and draw the path from those data values. Again, I'll post this so you can look at how it's done. Same kind of thing for the down, up, door, wall. We set our, you know, when we are drawing our turtle, when we're moving the turtle, you can see we get that property, we get that property, and then we use those in our defining of the stroke color, which, you know, is defined by whether it's a door or not. Whether the pen's down is whether we draw that, whether we create that path at all. And so we have a really cool little script that's actually pretty useful. At least I find it useful. Everything I do, I try to make it so I find it useful. So I've got characters, and it's like you walk into a 20 by 20 room. Oh no, you know, 20 by 20 room. Let's draw that 20 by 20 room, you know. So oop, I drew it wrong. That's my bad. And you go, oh, well, there's a door. Oops, I should have drew a door. Well, you know, no harm, no foul. Door color. Now we have our door. And now we want to start drawing our hallway. So there's a hallway here. Yay! Okay, so now I'm just playing because I'm having a good time. And so there you go. Easy peasy. Lemon squeezy. So we can draw maps quickly. We have a cool little script. We have a UI where we can move cursors and move things around and see how that works. We have the ability to display a user interface, and each one of these are links back to our script through the chat interface. And I find very cool that this doesn't like move. It just stays. Now, if we were sending output down here, like, you know, like you see on a lot of character sheets where you click on and it rolls damage, this would move, but I'm not outputting anything. So it just kind of hangs out here and I can draw to my heart's content. Okay, so now I'm screwing around. Anyway, so hopefully you found this useful as well. You saw a bunch of things on how we do user interfaces, saw a little bit about drawing paths, saw how we can move a cursor around the screen. So a lot of interesting, cool things there. I hope you enjoyed the video. So yet another Roll20 API scripting how-to video. So hopefully I don't turn Tabletop Tango into a video about Roll20, but hey, it's fun. I enjoy it, so why not? I hope you learned something here. And if you want to know sort of the basics, go back to my earlier videos where it'll show you how to use the script window to copy and paste and edit and do all those sorts of things. This is not that video. You can go back and look at that video. All right, well, thank you all for watching again. Hopefully you found it useful. This, once again, was Carl from Tabletop Tango. Bye now.